Welcome back everybody, this is Always back with another complete course video of Django REST framework. A Django REST framework is built on the top of a Django framework, which is a Python framework to build web applications. Now you could build RESTful APIs using Django, but the best part about REST framework is that it makes it very easy and quickly to build RESTful APIs. Now what would you like to learn RESTful APIs? Well, if you're a front-end developer and looking into becoming full-stack developer, then you need to learn one of the backend languages. It could be Node, Python, Java, C#. So this video is going to teach you how to write a server-side or backend code using Django REST framework. Now, what is a web API? Let's understand that if you are just a front-end developer. So for example, you're writing a code for your web application, it will be running on a browser, or it could be a mobile app running on Android or iOS. Let's just say you're using Twitter. When you open a web page of a Twitter, you see all the tweets from your following. Now, how do you see those tweets? Where does those tweets come from? Well, what happens is your front-end app, which is a Twitter website, makes an API call to the server, which is running somewhere in the world, and that server has a connection to a database which stores all the tweets. Now, once you make a request to the server, it talks to the database, it gets all the tweets back from the database, and then return a response to the front end. And this is how you show all those tweets to your web app. This is the basic concept of a web API. All the web application and mobile apps require a backend server who runs the code and talk to the database to send and receive responses and store data into database. The next thing, we're gonna look at course outline. Django REST framework, project setup, working with Django models, running migrations, serialization and deserialization, views and ViewSets, routers, rendering, authentication, permission, caching, testing. There's a lot more that we're going to be talking about. So yeah, this is going to be a complete REST framework course. Now also want to point out some of the features which comes out of the box from Django REST framework. For the short form, I'll be calling Django REST framework to DRF. And it comes out with authentication, object relation mapping, browsable API, admin tool, built-in development server. I mentioned a model view set. It's not a feature, but it actually some sort of view in Django REST framework which handles all the CRUD operations automatically for that specific model. We'll take a look at that when we write model view sets. We have a prerequisite for this course. This is a Python-based framework, so you're gonna have to learn Python before you can watch this video. A basic understanding of Django model and serialization would surely help. Also, I have organized this course into multiple videos. Please look at the description of this video for the complete playlist of this course. Last thing, I would like to request you guys to help this channel while donating. I've been spending a lot of time on this channel creating these videos for you guys. Another thing why I'm asking for donation is because this is a premium level content. You find these type of content on a paid online learning websites like Udemy or Skillshare. So if this video helped you learning Django REST framework, I would really appreciate if you could donate. In terms of how much you could donate, it's completely up to you. Even just for $1, that would surely help this channel and help me keep going and make all these videos for you. Here's a link for a PayPal donation, and if you don't have a PayPal, you find more details about it in the description of this video. We're going to be exploring Django REST framework documentation website. Now, this is a great resource. They have written a great documentation. I'll be referring to this website quite a lot throughout this video. So here is the website, django-restframework.org. Next thing I would like to point out to this 15,484. Basically, these are the stars given to this project on GitHub. If you click on this, that will take you to this page where you can see the source code of Django REST framework. Just to mention, it's an open source project, so you can contribute as well on a GitHub. A lot of people have forked it and there's a lot of contributors. So, well, we have 885 contributors. Let's go back to Django REST framework. So here we have a tutorial section, which has a basic introduction to this framework, API guide, where you find all the information. Now, for the prerequisite, you're gonna have to have some understanding of a Django, where it's a full-fledged web API or web application framework built on the top of Python. Here's the documentation for that. So go to djangoproject.com, click on documentation here. Now, just to mention this, I'm going to be referring to these websites, so it will help you to look more into documentation and explore more. A lot of times in the tutorial videos, you don't get to see where the actual instructor taking these things from. So I'm going to be referring to this documentation a lot. This is a great resource when you're learning Django. Also, for the Python guys, you can go to python.org and click on documentation, select Python 3 docs, and you want to go to tutorial. Here is a basic guide for Python. You're gonna have to understand Python before you can continue with this video. I have a playlist on my channel teaching Python as well, so you're welcome to look at that as well. The first thing we'd like to do is set up our environment. So let's do that now. So first thing, you want to make sure that you have a Python installed in your computer. If you don't have a Python installed, go to python.org. Go to downloads and download Python 3.7.4. So this is the latest version of Python in at the time of this recording, but you might have Python 3.7.5 or 6 when you watch this, but it's not gonna really make any difference because we're gonna be looking at Django REST, not particularly Python. Even though if you go back and download this Python 3.4.10, that would still work. So no stress if you have a latest version of Python. Now I want to open terminal. I'm using a Mac computer. Let me just zoom in a bit, and here I'll type Python space -- version. That tells me the version of Python I've installed, 3.7.4. Now if you're on a Windows, open command prompt and try to look at your Python version as well. So that's one thing. Next thing, once you've done that, then it comes to the IDE. Now you have two choices. Either you go with the VSCode, which is open source free text editor. It has a great set of extensions that you can use for Python as well. But I will be recommending to try out PyCharm, which is basically a paid tool for professional developers. Let me take you to the website. So here we have a Python community versions for pure Python development. And also we have a professional which supports HTML, JS, and SQL support as well. So yeah, just for, some people might not be able to use this PyCharm professional version. Just to show you, I will use VSCode to create a Django project and set up our virtual environment. Once that's all done, then I will use PyCharm. It has a great support, but don't worry, even if you're gonna use VSCode, you will be able to follow along with me in this course. The stuff we're gonna be using are pretty similar, but PyCharm has some better support for Django. Once you install Python and also VSCode, let's go and set up the project. So I am in VSCode. Click on a file, click on open, and go to the folder where you would like to create your project. So I'm going to go to DRF folder. Let's click on open. And now I can go to File Explorer here and see all the files available in this. I'm going to open a terminal. VSCode comes with a terminal built into it. Here you can see I'm in a terminal here. Now here, a few things we would like to do. We would like to create a virtual environment for our Django REST framework development. So the virtual environment is basically, it's going to help you not clutter your global Python, and it's going to help you to install packages locally, particularly for this project. So first of all, we're going to create that, and I'm going to type a command python-m virtual env, and then venv. So last venv is a name for our folder where virtual environment will be created. Now you might see an error that virtual env is not installed. So the first thing I would like to show you here, let's clear the terminal. You're going to need to install virtual env package. So you could do that by using pip. Pip is a Python package manager. So I'll type pip space dash dash version, and I want to make sure that pip is targeting to Python 3.7. Mac comes with pre-installed Python version 2. So if you install Python on a Mac, you might see pip is basically accessing Python 2. So if that's the case, you can use pip 3 instead of pip. So use pip 3. I'll use the install command, and then I'll type virtual env. Now it says requirements already satisfied, which means that I have a virtual env in this particular path. Okay, so now we're going to use that. So I'll type python-m virtual env, and I'll name the folder venv where our environment is going to be created. So let's press return or enter on a Mac. See a folder here in an Explorer called venv, and it lists out some other folders, and this is our installation for our virtual environment. Now, how do we activate that? I can activate that by using this command. Now, once you type this, you're going to see venv in brackets. So that means that our virtual environment is activated. Any package that is installed for Python, it will be installed locally. Next thing, let's deactivate our virtual environment by typing deactivate command on terminal, and that will be deactivated. Now, if I just click on this kill terminal button and open terminal again, as you can see, I will have to retype that command to activate my virtual environment, and that's a pain. So what you need to do is press Command Shift P, or you can go to View and click on Command Palette, and then here search for interpreter. You're going to see this select Python interpreter, select that. And here the last option would be your local virtual environment. You see the folder here, venv bin/python, select that. Okay, now once you select that, I'm going to click on this button to kill terminal and open a terminal again. Now as you can see that whenever you open a terminal, venv or virtual environment will automatically be activated. That saves a bit of time for you. I'm going to go back to Command Palette, and let's just say that you don't see this option for Python select interpreter. That's because you might have not installed a Python extension which gives support to VSCode. So you click on this button here and then search for Python. And here you can see we have a Python extension built by Microsoft. It gives us support for VSCode about Python. So as you can see, there's a lot of install of this. Now, this is the extension that you need to install. This is a must install extension for Python development in VSCode. Next, because we are using a Django REST framework, so you're going to have some extension for Django support as well. Now, there are millions of Django extensions, but I'm going to show you the best ones. So if you search for a Django in extension marketplace, you see this extension come up, the first one. Now it has about 900,000 installs. I would highly recommend you use this extension. It basically gives support for Django models and views and serializers. I know this terminology might not be familiar with you, but we'll get to it. There's going to be another extension, the second top one, which is built by Robert. It has very less installs compared to the other one, but it's really great because it gives you template and backend snippets, which basically you can type some shortcut and then it will write the big code for you. Mainly I'm going to be using this to create some models for our project. So yeah, install these two extensions, and there are a few other extensions like Django Test. We will come back to it and install this one once we get to the testing of our Django APIs, Django Web RESTful APIs. All right, so yeah, get this thing installed and we get an up and running with Python Django REST framework. Our VSCode is all set up for Django development. Let's go and create a new project. you're going to make sure that you have a virtual environment activated. And I'm going to install using pip. We install first of all Django. So type pip install Django. We're going to install Django REST framework. So use pip install Django REST framework. Now at this stage, we have something called Django admin. I'm going to type space -- version. Now we can see we have a Django admin installed 2.2.6. Let's create a new Django project using Django admin command line utility. So I'll type Django admin and I will check the version again and it says 2.2.6. That's all good. So Django -admin, the command for the start project, and then we can name it quiz. Okay, once you've done that, then you will see a folder here, a quiz folder, which has some boilerplate code like manage.py file. You should be familiar with manage.py file and these files because this is basically a plain Django project. Having a familiarity with this will surely help, but I will briefly touch on what this file does. So manage.py file is like a command line utility that helps you interact with the Django project in various ways. The inner quiz directory is the actual Python package for your project. Its name is the Python package name you will need to use to import anything inside it. Now my site _ init file is an empty file that tells Python that this directory should be considered a Python package. Settings.py file is a settings / configuration for your Django project. URL file is URL declaration for the Django project. And Whiskey is entry point for Whiskey compatible web servers to serve your project. Now once this is done, I would like to make some configuration here. We create a virtual environment outside, and also I will have to go inside this folder to create more apps. Now Django, is the concept in Django is like you create a project and you create apps, which is like, could be a reusable code or one particular code for your project that can be reused in multiple projects. So it's like you create multiple apps, inject them into your main project that can be used into your main project. But I want to do a bit of change here. First of all, let's deactivate our virtual environment. Next, I'm going to delete this venv folder. Let's delete that as well. And then I'm going to delete this .vscode folder as well. Okay, now I'm going to close this window. And I'm going to go to File menu and click on Open. And instead of opening DRF folder, I would like to open this quiz folder. Our project is open now. We are directly in our quiz project folder. So this is great now because I will be able to, create apps or do some Django admin command line utility function right in the terminal. I will not have to go outside, You could leave that there, virtual environment, but you could, just keep that in the same folder. So I'm going to create Python -m virtual env and then venv. This will create a virtual environment. And we have that folder there, guys. And then let's use that as an interpreter. I'm going to select this one. Let's kill the terminal. Let's start again and it should activate. Now quickly, let's install Django, pip install Django command. Once that's installed, then we should be able to use Django admin. Okay, now let's use pip install Django REST framework. Okay, you're gonna have to install this. Now once you install Django REST framework, we're gonna have to inject this into our project. Now we're gonna inject Django REST framework into our main Django project. The way we do it is by going to settings.py file, and here we can see we have an installed app array. And here, give it a space, add a single quote, and type REST_framework. Okay. Let's save this file, and now we are ready to use REST framework with our Django project. Now in the URLs, you can see we have this path set to admin, which is basically a tool comes with Django. It helps you to modify models within the web user interface. So let's start up our server. So to start the server, we type a command python manage run server. Let's press return, and now our server gets started, and it's listening on port 8000 on your local host. So if I click on that, and we should be able to see something on the browser. So I'll type localhost 8000. Now you go, we have a Django project running. Now the reason why you're seeing this is because the debug is equal to true is there. So I'm going to go to settings file, and here we have this debug set to true. That's why we're seeing this here. Okay, so at this stage we have successfully set up our project using VSCode, created a virtual environment, and also we are able to run our server. That's great. Before we jump to PyCharm and use that throughout this, I would like to show you how you can debug your application using VSCode. So if you look at the sidebar, you have this button here which lets you debug, and then here what you want to do is click on this arrow button, click on add configuration, and you get to the launch.json file. I'm going to close this and let's click on settings. That takes you again launch.json file. Let's click on play button here. Now once you click on play button, it gives you some options: a Python file debugging, a module, remote attach, or Django. As you can see, after you install those Django extension, you will be able to see this Django launch and debug Django web application. Let's click on that, and that what it'll do, it will create a configuration for us. And then it's saying that port is already used in the terminal. Don't worry about that. That's because you can have a multiple terminals in PyCharm. I'm going to stop this. Let's kill this, and let's kill that as well. Now here in the configuration, still got nothing. Click on play button, click on Django, and then it will start your server and it will debug that stuff for you. So after that, what you need to do is, for example, if I click on this here and I refresh the project, and that should take this breakpoint and then block us at this stage. Now this is not gonna work. We're gonna go to actually urls.py file, and let's just click on here. And now I'm going to restart our debugger by clicking on this button. And now you can see once I restart, it stops the server here. And here we're gonna have to resume our application by clicking on this button. And then it goes to this path. Okay, so you can go and debug stuff. So the path is there, and you can see the arguments and keywords. So debugging support is great in VS Code as well for Django projects. Okay, so our journey with VS Code ends here. I'm gonna open this same project in PyCharm. So let's just open PyCharm. I'm gonna use this professional version. Well, you can follow along. There is not much difference here. I will be just using PyCharm Professional just because it has a better support, but you can do the same stuff using VS Code. It's not gonna be, something, you can't do without PyCharm. So this was the project that was there already. I'm gonna close this project as well. Let's click on open. Let's go to the folder where I created this quiz app, click on open as well. And then here we go, we are in PyCharm. Now in PyCharm, I'm using a white theme. I'm gonna open up the terminal there as well. So Python has a built-in terminal. Now it automatically detects we have a virtual environment here. It activates it automatically. So as you can see, it's great. Now we're not using VS Code. I'm just gonna right click on this VS Code folder, and let's click on delete, and let's get rid of that as well. Now let me show you how you can run the server in PyCharm actually. So here we have a configuration. Let's click on edit configuration. And see, PyCharm Professional is pretty advanced. It automatically detected it's a Django project. It created a configuration for us automatically, and it selects our Python interpreter there as well. Okay, so I'm gonna click on this debug button. Let's click on that, and it's going to start our server on localhost 8000. And I'm going to refresh this page. Let me just put this here, Let's refresh the page, and as you can see, server is running, and on our debug console we can see we're getting this HTTP request. So yeah, that's all. The setup is done. Let's get started with actual Django now. Let's understand some basic concept of a Django REST framework. So let's just say you're building a front-end application with Angular or React. It's a web app, or let's say it's a mobile application. So what do? You make a request to your servers to access some sort of data, right? Now, these are the building blocks of your Django application. We have a model. Model is like a table in your database. You write a model in Python code, and object relation mapping, which is built into Django REST framework, takes care of converting that model into a database table. It can be SQL or NoSQL database. We have a serializer. So what is the serialization means? Before sending data back to the client after we have received a model, we need to convert that into JSON or XML or even simple text. Preferably web application or mobile application work with JSON data. So using serializers, we can convert the model into JSON, and then View takes that data and send back to your client. Now, when you make a request, it goes to the route. For example, you make a request to localhost 8000/ABC. Now we're gonna have to define that route URL files. Once that route hits this URL file, it looks for the view which is defined in our route path configuration. Now view, it's in a function which receive a request object and return a response object to a client. And then in the view function, you access a model serializer, do your logic, and then what you do is you send back a response back to the client. Now this is the basic concept of a web application built with the Django REST framework. Obviously there are a lot more concepts like authentication, permissions, caching, throttling, ViewSets. There's a lot more options available, but you need to memorize these things. If you watch this section of this video and understand what I'm talking about, and remember these four terminology: model, serializer, view, route. Understanding these four concepts will get you up and running with Django in very, very little time. Now, I hope that you got the point about route, view, model, and serializer. Let's take a look at how we can create a view and model, and then serialize that model and give that back to view, and then that can send back a response to a client. Now we need some sort of client to test our API as well. For a majority part of this course, we'll be using Postman. A Postman is a software which can help you to test your API very quickly. But let's see how we go. So let's get started with our coding stuff with Django REST framework. Let's go and explore our files. So in the quiz folder, I can see I have a URLs file. Let me just zoom in a bit. Now this URL file only have one path in an array called URL patterns. And in the imports, we are importing Django contrib import admin package and also the path package. Path package let us define routes for your application. So we're going to be using REST framework router later, but let's worry about that later. Let's take a look. Now here I can access the admin. So if I go to my web app, and let me start the server by clicking on debug first, and let's go to this. Now I'm accessing this web application on localhost 8000. So here it says admin/, which means there is something on /admin which I can access. So if I go here /admin, now I get to this page where I can type in a username and password. Now we need to create some sort of a user in our application. Now Django REST framework comes with authentication and user management out of the box. One thing I would like to mention here is when we start the server, Django REST framework automatically, or let's say Django automatically creates this db.sqlite file. If I take a look at the settings.py file, let me give you a bit of introduction about it. So right on the top, we have allowed how host. So basically this value will determine from where you can make an API call. These are the install apps. Now, I assume that you already know all these because I expect a basic knowledge of Django. Now here we define all the apps, just like a REST framework app. These are some middlewares, route confs. So it says route URL conf is set to quiz.urls. So quiz.url is this file, URLs, okay? Next, we have some database configuration. So by default, it creates a Sqlite database. It's like a file. But if you want to use Postgres or MySQL database with Django, I will drop some text in the description that you can just replace this and then make sure you have your credential right there, and then you can connect to other databases as well. All the SQL databases are pretty much supported there. All right, so here we have some configuration and time zone and static URL. Now this file contains all of the configuration for your Django project. Any kind of configuration that you need to do, you need to define that here. Okay, let's get back to our db.sqlite file. I'm going to double click on that. Now once I double click on that, it's not actually opening here. Now you have two options. To open this file, we can use this db SQLite software. So you go to sqlitebrowser.org and download for your specific operating system. If you're in Windows, go for the 64-bit Windows zip file. If you're on a Mac, you can download here. You can install through Homebrew as well. If you're on a Linux, then you can, follow along this, and you'll know how to install this. Now I've already got that here. So I'm just gonna open that application. I'm actually opening that for the first time as well. So here's an application. It tells me, hey, there's a new version available. Let's not worry about that for now. I'm gonna click on Open Database, and then go to development, DRF, quiz, and here are db.sqlite file. I'm gonna click on open. And once I open this, you can see we don't have any table, no views, nothing. Now what's going on? We were supposed to see some default tables from Django. Now to do that, you need to run a command on the terminal. It's basically running a migration for your project. So I'm going to open terminal, and here I make sure that I have activated this VNV, and now I'm going to run a migration. So I'm going to use a Python, so target manage.py, make migrations, enter, and it says no changes detected. That's fine. So we use Python manage, and we use a command migrate, enter, and there you go. It applied all the migration for admin, auth, content types, and sessions. So these are like a default stuff. Now here I'm going to have to refresh this, and then there you go. We got tables, we got indices. Now here, if you take a look at the user table, I'm going to right click and click on browse table. Now we have a default user already set up, which has an ID, password, lost logins, is super user, username, stuff like that. Okay. Now Django provides a very easy way to create a super user. A super user is someone that can modify your models through your Django admin dashboard, I would say. So how do we create that? So I'm going to go to terminal. I'll probably go to preferences, and I'm going to click on editor, font, and font. I'm going to make this font to about, let's just say 15. Let's make the font bigger so it's easier for you guys to see. Okay, so here I would like to create a super user. The command for that is create super user. Let's use Python manage.py. I use create super user, and then I'll use -- email flag, and I'll say, let's just say admin@admin.com. And for the username, I'll use this username flag, and I'll simply say admin. Enter, and it's going to ask for a password. So I'll type hello123 for a password. 123. Now it says, hey, password is too common. Would you really bypass password validation and create user anyway? I'll say Y and press return. Now we have a user. Let's go back to our DB browser. Let me refresh this, and there we go. We can see we have a user called admin@admin. Username is admin, and it says date joined there as well. So as you can see, the Django REST framework gives us lots of things out of the box, and it's great. So now we have a password which is already hashed, and it has a built-in validation where you cannot type a common password. All right, I'm gonna refresh, and I'm gonna use admin hello123 and log in, and there you go. You get to see that site administration where you have authentication and authorization section, and you have a users, and you can see there's only one user. So I can click on this and I can modify the first name. Let's just say Awais Jamil or Awais Mirza. Okay, I can set if it's a super user status or active or staff status. We have some user permissions that I can change there as well. Let me just expand this so we can see it better. Now we have a last login, date joined as well. So everything already done. Django REST framework comes with this out of the box with user management. Okay. Back in our code, I am in urls.py file. Here we can see a path set to admin/, which basically running our admin panel. We'll come back to admin panel and explore more about it. But for now, let's go and create a new view. A view requires a URL, or basically an API endpoint. So I'll type path, and in single quotes, I'll define test / and then comma, and then here I'll have to tell it which view I'm trying to target. So I can target something like index, which basically be coming from view file. So let me just comment this out for now. Okay, and let me just get rid of this color. Probably not, that's fine. Now we're gonna go to quiz folder. Let's go right click and then create a new Python file. I'll name it views. And in the views file, we'll create a view. So how do we create a view? It's basically a function, as we've already seen. So we're gonna define a view here. So I'm gonna write a comment here saying this file contains views. Okay. Next, we're going to import APIView from Django REST framework. Now, we're not going to be using a Django specific, but Django REST framework. So I'll use from REST framework. As you can see, PyCharm gives you support to, access some third-party packages as well. So we say from REST framework dot decorators import API view. Now this API view will help us to create a view. Next, we're going to use this. So I'll define a function. I'll name it, let's just say index. And as a parameter, I'll say take a request object. And then we can create a message which will be returned. So you say this is the test URL. And then in the next, we are going to return a response object. Now we're going to have to import response object as well. So I'll do from REST framework dot response. Oops, not request, but response. And we can import response from this package. Now I'll say return response, and that takes some parameters. So here we're going to say data equal to, we can say message, and then status would be, let's just say we're going to have to download our package, use that package as well for the status as well. Or for now, I'll just say 202. well, that's not actually going to work because it's not a string. Okay, so we can import that package as well right on the top. So we say from REST framework dot status, and then we are going to import status. Okay, so let's just not import status, but just from a REST framework, and we use a status. Okay, now here I would like to access that status dot, and we can say HTTP 200, which is okay. Now let me ident this properly. Now we've created the index view. We go back to URL files, and here I'm going to tell it what view I'm trying to access. I'll say index. Now it doesn't know what index is, so we have to import that file. So I'll say from quiz.views import index. So here I'll say index, and then there's another argument that we can pass in here, which would be name equal to index. I'm going to save this file, and let's just rerun our server because we created a new file. It wouldn't know about it. Let's create that, and let's uncomment this file and save it again. Now in the browser, I'm going to access localhost 8000/test. Now once I do that, it says there's a get method, but it's not able to, make it as a HTTP endpoint. The reason for that is we created a simple Python function, but we did not tell it that this function acts as an API endpoint. To do that, we're gonna have to use this APIView decorator that we just imported. So I'll use @APIView decorator, and then in the parentheses, we use an array, and that will take as a get request. Let's ident it properly. Let's save the file, and now I'm gonna refresh this page. Once I refresh the page, as you can see, it says this is the test URL. It returns this string, which is coming from our message. Now you might be wondering, what the hell is this? Where this UI come from? Well, if we go to, let me actually put the browser on the side here so we can see that all the time. I'm gonna go to Django REST framework website. And here it says browsable API. Let's click on that, and we can see what is this. Now browsable API is basically this kind of a UI, which basically lets you access your API. So if I click on snippets, it returns this. Now you could actually change that into JSON, which returns like this. Okay, but Django REST framework is great because it shows you all your responses, allowed methods, and content type, and it just gives you things automatically. And it says you the ViewSet automatically provides list create and update and destroy. It's like a CRUD operations. Okay, so this is great. This is what's happening here because we are using APIView decorator from a REST framework. This is why it's making it look like this. So we've successfully created an endpoint, and then we define that in a URL as well. So if I change here to, let's just say index, and save that file. Now if I refresh, it says page not found, and it tells me using URL conf defined in quiz.url, Django tried this URL pattern in this order. So it gives you, some feedback, what's wrong with your request or what's going on. And that is because of this debug is equal to true is set. Okay, let me open a new page. We'll access localhost 8000, and it's again saying page not found. The reason for that is because we added a REST framework into our install app. Now we are not actually targeting Django anymore. So here, if you want to access, this is the index page, then you can go to URL conf and simply remove index and leave empty single quotations. I'm gonna refresh this page, and again we get to this. This is the test URL. So let me modify this message to just verify. This URL is at index. Let's save the file and then let's refresh the page. Now our message gets changed. This URL is at index. Now this is a browsable API, which means that for most of the time we don't really need to use Postman or any front-end project, but you could make an API call using JavaScript as well. So I'm going to open up Postman and let me show you how you can test it with the Postman quickly. So here I would like to create a new request. So let me just close everything. These are just the requests. Now here I'll say HTTP localhost 8000, and it's just a GET request. We send it and then we get back, this is the URL at index. We don't see that pretty UI, okay, because we're not using browsable APIs. Back to the code. Now, so far, let's summarize what we have done so far. So first of all, we go to URLs file. Here we define the path. We targeted this index, which is coming from quiz.views file, and then we set the name to index. Now this is basically a function. If I go here, we define a function in Python using def keyword. Index is the name of the function. It expects the request object. There's a variable message which has a string value, and then it returns a response. Now, how many things we imported from Django REST framework? To create this function as endpoint, we had to decorate it with APIView. To return the response, we imported this package response from restframework.response. For the status codes, we can import status from REST framework as well. So you could define a status code in your separate files, and then you could pass in here. You can pass that in here. But REST framework provide this status code already, so why not use their predefined status code? Now this function, I would call it, this endpoint is a function based view. A view is basically an endpoint in Django terminology. You hit this URL and then whatever the view, or what you call a function, but in Django terminology it's in a view, so we call it a view from now on. So view index gets hit and then it gets request object. We will explore request object in a second, but first let me take you to the Django documentation. So in API guide, if we go to the views, we can see there are two types of views available in Django REST framework: class-based views and function-based views. So what we did is we did a function-based view using this API_view decorator. As it states here, REST framework allows you to work with a regular function-based views. It provides a set of simple decorators that wrap your function-based views to ensure they receive an instance of a request object. Rather than a usual Django HTTP request, it allows them to return a response object from Django REST framework. So this is the decorator, call it signature, API_view. We need to define what methods are allowed. So let's go back and take a look at one more thing. So here I would like to allow post method. So let's just type post here, save the file. We're going to open Postman, and from Postman I'm going to hit this endpoint using a get request. So let me just put it here. Okay, now here you can see we selected get request. I'm going to send that, and now it says detail method get not allowed. If I change this to post, I send that, and then it returns this URL is at index. So as you can see, function based views can be defined what type of method that we're going to be hitting. So here we have a get, post, update, delete. Here's basically a sample saying hello world, returns an object, response object, with the message as a key and then the value. Now we have some policies for the decorators as well, which we can define. What is a policy? A policy is something, let's just say that you are going to only allow the authenticated user to access this endpoint. To do that, you're going to have to define a policy. There are some decorators available to define the policy, for example, permission classes. So you can define permissions for that endpoint using this policy. We have authentication classes as well. We'll talk about these when we get to the class-based views. Now we'll talk about request object, and also if we want to allow multiple request methods. Right now we only allowing post request. So here in browsable API provided by Django REST framework, if I refresh the page, it gives me an error message. It's not an error message, but it's saying method get not allowed. So if I change this to get and save the file, our server automatically restarts. I'll refresh and I get this URL is at index. Now what I would like to do is I would like to allow post as well. So I'll type post here. Now this is in list in Python terminology. So we're using square brackets, get, comma, post in single quotes. Now if I go and refresh this page, I can see allow options are post and get. Now browsable API is using get. Now if I refresh this, it let me see this URL is at index. And here we have an option for post as well. So if I click on post, now I've used the post method and it still returns this URL is at index. Now here is a media type that we can post to this URL. So here if I add an object saying hello, and then I use a column to say hello world, or we can say hello Django REST framework, okay, and close the object. Now I'm gonna send this, and now it says JSON pass error, expecting properly naming close in double quotes. Okay, we're gonna have to do that in double quotes, guys. So let's add a key here. I'll name it hello, and then hello Django REST framework, and then close that. Let's post it. And now once we post that, and this should receive that object. Now we are going to get rid of this line of code, and I would like to see what kind of request that I'm getting. What is the method of the request? So we can do that by accessing this request object. So I'll say print request.method. I'm going to save the file, add a parenthesis here. We should not have these parentheses. Let's save the file. Now in the console, I'm going to click on get, and now it says message is not defined, because that's the problem here that we did. So I'm going to actually define an object here. Let's save it, and now I'm going to refresh the page again, and now I get message hello from Django. It's an object now. Now here in our console, once I click on get, I can see the request was get because I'm printing out request.method. So request.method will tell you what type of request it is. If I click on post, and I can see I'm printing it was post method. So what we'll do here within our function based view, I'll use the if statement, and I say request.method equal to, let's just say get. Okay, then we are going to return a response object, and I'm going to, let's just cut this from here. All right, and then Let's get rid of it for now. Elif request.method, and then I'll say if it's a post method, then we can return another object, and this time I'm going to return what's coming from front end. So using this request method, we can see what data we're receiving with the post. Let me take you to the documentation of request object. Now, request object has this request.data key. It returns the pass content of the body, which is sent through this request.post, and also request.files attributes. Now, I would like to access the request.data. So uncomment this, and we can use request.data, and we can set the status code to, let's just say, status.http 200 OK. Then we use else. Then we can return a response with the data saying we can send a message. Let's just say request method is not right. And now I would like to click on get, and it says hello from Django. For the post, I'm going to add an object here. Let's click on post, and I get back hello from Django. And I'm going to paste this here, and I'm going to say hello from world. Let's post that again, and then we get back hello from world. So you can see we can access the data coming from our post request using request.data. Let me just print that out as well for you guys. Make another request. I'm going to post that here, and now all the way down you can see an object coming in, hello and hello from Django. So now we've seen the function based views and also the request object. Now let's go back to the documentation and explore a bit more. Obviously we can see data and files can be accessed, and also support parsing of HTTP method other than post, which is put and patch request. We'll talk about query params later. Parsers are there as well. So parsers decorator will ensure that this properly automatically set the list of parser instance based on the parser classes. We can define a parser classes setting in a settings.py file as well. Now basically parsers are responsible for parsing your body of your request into a string, or if it's an object or any content type that is there. We go down, and here we have authentication. Basically REST framework provides flexible per request authentication policies. So we have authentication policies. You can apply multiple authentication policies. I know this doesn't make sense to you right now if you're really beginner with Django, but these are the policies that we can define. We will learn about these policies, how we can define that in a settings file, and also on a multiple authentication policies for one particular endpoint. Also, it provides user and token information associated with the incoming request. To demonstrate that, we're gonna go back to the code, and here I've done some modifications. So I'm printing request.user and I'm printing request.auth. Let's make a request by using this get button. Once I make a request all the way down, I can see the admin, and there is no authentication, so it returns none. Let's do one more time, and then we can see we have a user as admin and none for auth. So if I just let me just go to the postman, and I'm gonna send a get request which returns hello from Django. Now here, when you take a look at your user, now it says anonymous user and there is no auth. Now Django REST Framework Browsable API provides this login stuff. So once you log in, you can see the username right on the top. That's why we're getting this user as admin. So it's really great that you can access if it's an anonymous user or if it's an authenticated user. That's about it for function-based views. Now we're gonna jump into class-based views. Before we talk about class-based views, I'm gonna show you the documentation for function-based views. And this is where you're going to get all the information. We have seen a demo how to use function-based views and how to set routers for it. Now, right on the same page, if you go to API guide and click on views, you click on class-based views, and this is where you get REST framework provides an API view class, which subclass is Django view class. If you're familiar with Django views, there is a class called view in Django. So there are a few differences between view and API view class provided by REST framework. So here's the information for that. So request passed to the handler method will be the REST framework request instance instead of Django HTTP request. Also, the handler method may return REST framework response instead of Django's HTTP response. So here, right in views.py file, I'm going to start by defining a class, and I will just name this class message, and I will add API view as an argument. Now here, you gotta import API view class from REST framework.views. Now we're gonna define methods for our get request, post request, update, delete, put request. Now in function-based views, you could check a request.method, and then that would give you if the type of request is get, post, update, or delete, or even put. But in class-based views, you're gonna have to define a separate function for each of these types of requests. So we have methods like a get method, post method, put, delete, update. So for the get, we can define a function, so def, and use a get, and then that would take a self, which basically refers to the class itself. All right, and then comma, and it's going to expect the request object. Now inside this, we are simply going to return a response, which is a REST framework response. We have already imported that, and I would like to response a data, as this is the class-based view. Okay, you want to set the status as well. You can do that by use a status dot redo HTTP 200, which is okay. Now I'm gonna actually hide this sidebar. Now let's verify if it's actually getting hit by our request. But first we're gonna have to specify the routing for it. So we go to urls.py file, and here we are going to define another path, and we'll just name it message slash, and now we're gonna access a message class. So we have to import that quiz.views and then dot comma, and we import a message. Then let's access message here, and now if I just leave it here, like in this index view, we just specify a name. So for example, if I say name equal to, let's just say a message. Now if I try to go to message here, so let's try go message, enter, and that gets an error. It says takes one positional argument but two were given. Now the difference between this path versus this path is that this is a function-based view and this is a class-based view. For the class-based view, you're gonna have to call a method by defining dot as view. So this method basically makes it ready for getting hit by the API call. Now if I refresh this page, this returns this is the class-based view, as you can see. Now let's just go back to views.py file, and here I would like to do print, and then we can say hit by API call. Let's save it. Let's bring up the debugger, and I'm just gonna move this bit down. And in the console, if I go and click on a get, and now we see a message hit by API call, which means that this request is getting hit by our URL. Now similarly, we can test it by postman as well. Here we have localhost :8000/message. I'm going to click on send, and that returns this is a class-based views. Now if I change the method to post and then send the request, it's going to show an error and define a function named post, and that will take a request object, and then here we can print some message saying hit by post request. We're going to return a response. Let's do a data and then say this is the class, and we can set the status as well. Let's put another slash here and let's send, and now it says this is a class-based view hit by the post method. Okay, if I send a request via get method, now we get this is a class-based view. Let's change the message, say hit by get request, and let's change this to hit by get request. We have get and post. If I go to documentation, here we can see we have some dispatch methods like post, put, patch, and delete. And then here we're going to go to body, and let's just do the form data, and I'll say hello key, and then we can set the value to this is the body of post request, and let's send. And now here we want to print out what did we get with the request body. Now we could access a data coming from a request by accessing this requested data. Similarly here you can have print function request.data. Let's print it out and then let's send it again. Now on the console, I'm going to go all the way down, and here we should see the data coming in from the request. Let me just save the file, and that should update this, and let's go and send this data, and we get the response back. This is a class-based view hit by get request. Yes, that's exactly right, because we're hitting this get method, not the post method, and we're trying to print out this requested data in the post. So that's the problem there. Let's go back and change this to post request. Now we have a body, we have a hello key, and then the string. Let's send it. We got the response back, and here we get the query dictionary hello, and in an array we get the message back. Okay, so as you can see, we can send the data through post request, and you can access whatever you want to return from a get request. So I don't want to go into details about adding all these functions. Simply just add put function, patch, and delete, do its manipulation, set the type of your request, and you will hit that function. The other things that we can talk about later, for example, get permissions or get authenticator or get parsers. Get authenticator returns if it's been authenticated or not. So in function-based view, you could say request a user or request of auth. You could access the same thing by adding this get authenticator function. You can call this, and that will return you if it's like authenticated or not. Let's talk about Django models. A model is a single definitive source of information about your data. It contains the essential fields and behavior of the data that you're storing in your database. For example, here is a database tab, and I can open db.sqlite file here right in PyCharm. So if you don't have a PyCharm professional, you won't be able to do that. You're gonna have to open that DB Sqlite browser. And here in the schemas, I can see all of these tables in my database. So for example, here we have auth_user table. So the way we store data in a database using Django is by defining models, and Django will automatically translate those models into database tables. So you can access data from a database table and return through view. Also, we have a concept in Django called serializer. Basically, when you return data to your front-end client, for example, if it's an Angular or React or Vue application, you're gonna work with the JSON. So you need to serialize your data coming from a database into JSON format. For that, we use serializers. I'm going to minimize this, and let's close this file as well. the main project for this tutorial would be creating a quiz backend API. So we got the main project done, but Django provides a concept of apps. Now what's the difference between projects versus app? So the difference between a project and an app is a web application that does something. For example, web log system, a database for public record, or a simple poll application, or a simple quiz application. A project is a collection of configuration and apps for a particular website. So within one system, you might have an app for authentication, you might have an app for user login. So all of those functionality can be put into apps, and that basically makes your code more organized. So we're going to be creating a quiz application. So I will create an app for that. So I'm going to open the terminal, and here I would like to create an app by using start app command. So we'll use Django admin start app, and then we can name our app, let's just say quiz. That's not a problem, but we have a project name set to quiz, so I'm actually going to say QV1. Okay, and that would create a folder QV1, and here we have some files like admin.py file or apps.py file, models.py file, test.py file, and views.py file. Now pretty much all of these files are pretty empty. All they have is some sort of import. Now here you're gonna look at apps.py file, which basically has a name for your application. This application needs to be added into your main project. So when we run our server or when we run our migration, that project, or sorry, not project, but app, will be included into your main project. The way we do it, we go to settings.py file, and here we have installed app array. Now you can already see that we have installed few apps here, like Django.contrib.admin is a single app, authentication is a single app, session, content types, messages, static files, and we basically added the REST framework here as well. So REST framework is nothing but an app that can be injected to your project. So I'm gonna give a space here, and I will type QV1 and add a comma. Now once I do that, and I will go and start our project, I'm gonna click on this debugger, and that's going to run our code. As you can see, no error so far. If I refresh this, no error. Okay, so we're gonna talk about models. Now let's create some models. So this is a file, models.py file, which was automatically generated when we created this app. Now here I'm gonna create a simple model. So we already have an import for models. I'm going to start with the class, and let's create a person model. I'm going to inject models.model. Now what model does is it basically is going to replicate these fields in this class into your database. I'm going to double click on this db.sqlite. If you don't have a PyCharm professional, then you're going to have to open this file into DB browser SQLite application we've already seen, but I have a professional version for PyCharm, so I can open it directly in the PyCharm. So here if I double click, you see we have a table name auth_user. So this person would be our table in our database, and here we have fields like columns, ID, password, last login, is super. Now here we're getting some stuff done in a DB panel. Yeah, I'm pretty sure not many people will have this PyCharm professional, so I'm just gonna minimize that. Let's close this, and here I'm going to define some fields now. So we'll say a name field, and now we're gonna define what type of data this name field can have. So if I open database again, double click on this, now here you can see we have some sort of data, like we have a lot of gibberish here, which is like hashed password. Here we have a string, And here we have a checkbox, which is like a Boolean. Django ORM provide these field types. I'm going to take you to the documentation and show you where you can read more about field types. Basically, there's a lot of them, so it's very hard to cover all of them into one video, and it's just going to waste the time. So I'm just going to take you to the documentation. So here I'm at the page for field types. For example, we have an auto field, a big auto field, big integer field, a binary field. What we are interested in, character field. We have a date field, a date and time field, a decimal field, duration field, email field, which is another one which is important. When you're going to create a sign-up form for your application, you're going to need an email field, a file field, which basically gives you information, that a file upload field. Okay, let's go down and see if we can find something else. A file path field, float field, image field. You can see there's a lot of fields available. So let's go back to our code, and here for the name, let's minimize this. I'm going to use a character field. So I'm going to say models dot character field, and this will require some arguments. So we have some arguments. I'm going to specify max length, and let's give it 300. Now I'm going to use email, and I'm going to use a models.email field, and that's it. No need to define a max length or anything for that. Let's use what we can do, date of birth probably, and with that we do use date field for that. Okay, now here in the date field, I'm gonna show you that you can say auto created. My theme is actually hiding stuff here, so it's like auto now add, a default, auto created. So when we create a new instance of a person in our database, this date field will automatically be initialized with the current date and time. So let's not worry about that for now. And then we are going to use something like age. And for that, we can have integer field. Okay, I'm going to save this file, and let's go and run the migration. I'm going to open terminal, and here I'm going to run the command python manage.py make migrations. And now here you can see migration for QB1, create a model person. Now to verify that, we can open DB Sqlite here, and let me refresh this. Once I refresh, I should be able to see that person table here. Probably I'm gonna stop this, and I'm gonna start this again. Now, do you remember one thing that we are missing? Yes, it actually created that model, and you can verify that in a migration that you have this 0001 underscore initialized. This is like a migration, it's been created, but you haven't applied that to your database. So the way you do that, by defining python manage migrate, enter, and it says all migration for QB1 session content types are applied. Now here in DB, if I click on this button, which will refresh that, and here we should see QB1 underscore person. Now you can see we have fields now, which we just defined. For example, I'm just going to right click and click on split vertically. Let's close that from here. Close this file. Now here you can see we have a model now, and we have actually a table named QB1 underscore person, and then it has all the fields. One thing I would like to mention, you should be familiar about this, but I'll just explain that to you. This ID field we didn't define, so every Django model will have this ID field automatically initialized. If you want to override that, you're gonna have to type ID equal to models.autofield, and that will do the same thing. It will just increment the ID for every model that gets created. I'm actually going to remove this and let's save that. Now we have created a model. Let's play with it for, for a few seconds. And for that, I'm going to open a terminal and I'm going to open Python manage shell. Now this is an interactive shell, and here I would like to access model. So I'll do from qv1.models import person, and now person has been imported. Create a new person. So I'll say p equal to, we add person, and then we are going to have a name for that. So I'll type name equal to, I'll just say my name and add a comma. For email, we can say hello@test.com, comma, and we need DOB, which has a date. So I'm actually going to try defining a date equal to, and I don't know what the format that will take. Let me go to a DB and we can actually copy paste the date from here. So let's just try copying this format. Hope that works. Well, I couldn't really do that because that's the problem there. So we are going to have to change something here because I'm not sure how I define a date right here. So let me just minimize this, and here I'm going to say auto created to true. Save the file, and I'm going to get out from the shell by typing, let's just do exit. Let me just close this, guys, terminate it, and let's open the shell again. And now we're going to have to run Python manage make migrations, and then it says alter field DOB on person, that's right. And then I do Python manage migrate. Now that should be applied now. So here I'm going to go to Python manage shell, and let's clear that out. Now we're going to import person model. So we'll do from qv1.models import person. Now we've imported that. Let's create a variable name p equal to person, and we need to define a name. I'll say my name here, comma, email. I'll just say test@test.com, comma, and I don't worry about that DOB anymore. All I worry about is age equal to, let's just say 30, and that's it. Now a P is basically a person object. Now how I'm going to save that, so we say p.save, and I'm going to call this, okay. Now there's a problem with DOB, it hasn't been created yet. So we say p.dob equal to, and I'm just going to type gibberish like 12-12-12. Let's see if that works. Yep, that works. So type p.save function. Still, it's not a valid date format, year, month, date. Okay, so we do p.dob equal to, and I'm going to say 1990 dash a month, let's just say 12/01, enter. Okay, now I hope that would work. p.save, enter. Yep, that worked. Now here in our table, I'm gonna go and close this. Let's open a DB and let's just open this one. Now here you can see we have a 1990 12 ID, awaits test, and then age 30. Now using Python shell, you can see we actually created that. So I'm gonna create another one. So we'll just do DOB equal to, and for that I'll do, let's just say 1980-8-12 comma, and that's the person now. We do p.save function on it, enter, and here if I refresh, I should have another one with a different date now, 1980-08-12. Okay, so you can see using Python shell how you can add entries to the database. Now let's close this, and I'm going to close pretty much all the file except models. Now we create a quiz application, so let's start with the actual model that we're going to be using for this project. So I'll say class, and I will create a quiz, and I will add models.model class. Now we're gonna need a field for, let's just say, name, and we can have models.character field, and we can say, let's just say 300 or 200 is fine. Now we are going to use created_date equal to models.date field, and I'm going to set that auto now to true. Okay, and we can also have description for that, so I'll do description equal to models.text field. Okay, here we have some parameter that we can use. PyCharm is pretty great. It actually giving you lots and lots of options. So I'm going to actually use one verbose name, which will be the table name. So I will set that equal to description only. We can use a null. Basically, I'm going to set that to true because maybe somebody creating a quiz doesn't want to really add any description. So we can say it can be null. Okay, now I'm going to create another called URL. So we say models.character field, or we can have a URL field there as well. Now for this, we can have some parameters like, we can set that verbose name to URL, and it can be none. Let's just say we say null equal to true. Now we have a quiz model. Okay, now quiz will have an auto-generated ID. Next, we're going to create a class named question. We do a model.model, and here we are going to create some fields. For example, let's just say question equal to, and that can be text field. So we do model.text field, and again, a verbose name would be question, and that cannot be null. Okay, if somebody creating a question, it has to define the question. Next, we define a question choices. So I'll say choice 1 equal to models.text field. Verbose name would be choice 1, and that cannot be null as well. I'm going to add 3 more, and we can name this to choice 2, choice 3, choice 4, and choice 2 here, 3, and 4. Now we can also tell store in the model that what is the correct answer. So I'm gonna say answer equal to models dot, and we can use, let's just say, character field, and here we are going to, let's just say, max length would be 10. Okay, let's save this, and now we're gonna run a migration. So let's clear our Python shell, and now I'm gonna write Python manage make migration, and there's a problem here. It says max length attribute. Okay, character field must define a max length attribute. So there is a character field which has not defined. So that's a quiz.name. There you go. So we need to use max length 200. Okay, let's press Command Option L on PyCharm. It will auto indent stuff. Let's use Python manage.make migration, Now we created model question and quiz. And also we have a person, or actually it's deleted that person model. Now let's run our migration, actually apply by using migrate command. All good now. And let me refresh the database. And here we can see we have a question, we have a quiz. Now one thing, I would like to make a relation of a question to a quiz. For that, we are going to add a relation with foreign key or one-to-one field. Go back to models.py file, and here I will say a quiz equal to models.foreign key, and that would be quiz. We can use on delete. That would be models.cascade. Okay. Now let's save the file, and we're going to go to terminal and run the migration again. So let's make migration. It says you're trying to add a nullable field quiz to question without default. We can't do that. The database needs something to populate existing rows. So let's add an option 2, press 2, enter, and that's all good. Now we're going to use Python migrate command. So the migration are applied, and now I'm going to click on question, and here we can see we have an ID, question, choices, answer, and then a quiz ID. Also we have a quiz, and we can start values to it. For example, if I'm going to go to shell, I can add a value there, or I can use PyCharm to add a field here. So we'll just say name would be JavaScript test. We can say description, this is the JavaScript quiz to test your skills. Created date is null, we basically leave them null. Okay, let me right click and click on submit. And now it's going to say not null constraint. Okay, we're going to have to define a created date where, you know, PyCharm is pretty advanced, so I'm just going to select this date. For URL, let's just leave that empty, and then we click on the submit, and that's been submitted. And here we have a timestamp for a date. Okay, so we can do that with the question as well, but I want to use a Python shell for that. So let's open Python shell. So type python manage.py shell from qv1.models. We import quiz, comma, questions. I think it's question, yes. Okay, now we're going to create a new question. So we already have a quiz created with the ID 1. And now here we have a quiz ID, which is like a foreign key. So we're going to have to define that as well. So I'm going to create a question equal to question, and we need a key, first of all, question. Now this is an auto-generated ID. We don't have to define that. So I simply type question equal to what is the JavaScript. Okay, comma, for the choice 1, we can say programming language, comma, choice 2 equal to, here we can say website, choice 3 equal to mobile app, comma, choice 4 equal to, let's just say mobile, not mobile, but let's just say computer. I don't know what to call it, but, and then we need to define answer equal to would be programming language. Now it's gonna need a quiz ID as well, so quiz_id. We can set that equal to 1. Question got unexpected keyword. Problem is with the answer, so I wrote the wrong spelling. I'm gonna press enter. Now we have a question. Let's save that question. So we're gonna use question.save function, enter, and here I'm gonna refresh this, and there you go, we have a question in the quiz. So you can use PyCharm if you have a professional or DB browser to add question easily. Otherwise you can use Python shell to do that. Now let's close this file, and I just created this serializers.py file. So just create that, it's an empty file. In the model, we have created two models, quiz and question. Now before we can write a view and send the data back through our view, we need to serialize this into JSON. Django REST Framework provides serializers, which basically, let me read this. Serializers allow complex data such as query set and model instances to be converted to a native Python data types that can then be easily rendered into JSON or XML. Nowadays, every mobile app or web application works with JSON, and we're going to be converting this into JSON as well. Now we have serializers where we can see how we define, how we serialize objects, and then how we render. But Django REST Framework provides a better way of dealing serializers when you are serializing a model. If you look at here, we have a model serializer. Here it says often you will want to serialize classes that maps closely to Django model definition. So we did define a Django model here, okay? So we can use this model serializer class, which will help us to do serialization very, very easily. So let's go into serializer class. Let me zoom in a bit. So we do from REST framework dot serializers import model serializer. Okay, now we're going to use a class, and I'm going to say quiz serializer, and we're going to add model serializer. Now here it's going to take another meta class, and we're going to tell it what model to serialize. Define inner meta class. We're going to define a model, and we're going to have to import the model. So type from QE1 dot models, and we can import quiz and question as well. So here I'm going to ident it properly. I'm going to use quiz for a model, and for the fields I'm going to use this short form in a single quotes __ all. Okay, let me just ident it properly as well. So now we're gonna have to add a class for question serializer, and that will take model serializer as well. We have an inner class meta model would be question, and for the fields we can use this _ all. Okay, let's ident it properly as well. Let's write a view for it. Let's go to the view file, and here on the view files we are going to import from REST framework dot views, and we're going to import APIView. Now let's create a class. So we are going to create a class for, let's just say, quizzes. Okay, it's going to return us all the quizzes. I'm going to inject APIView, and now we're going to need a get method. So type get, whoops, not this one. And then here we are going to, well, we need a request object. For the get, we don't really need it, but we just, put it there. Format, we set that equal to none for now. I'll explain that. What is this? Now here, for the get request, what I would like to do is import a model. So for example, from QE1.models, we import questions.quiz as well. Let me zoom in a bit, and let's just minimize this. Next, we're going to import serializer as well. So I'll type QE1.serializers, and then here we can import question serializer, comma, quiz serializer. So let me quiz serializer. Okay, now here we're gonna grab all the queries, all actually quizzes from a database. So the way we can do that is by using query set. It's just a variable name, and then I'm gonna use quiz as a model dot objects dot all. So this will grab all the all the rows for quizzes in our database. Then we're gonna need a serializer, and then I'm gonna use quiz serializer, and then that would take our query set. And another thing, I want to set that many to true. Okay, once we serialize that, that will become basically a serialized object. Then we can simply return a response. So let's just go and import response from a REST framework. So REST framework dot views, and that would take response object. All right, so actually not from the views, guys, that's the response. All right, now let's return that. So let's just do return, and we are going to return a response object, and that would be data equal to serializer dot data, and we can set the status, and we need to import the status code from REST framework as well. So REST framework dot status import status. Actually, we can import all the status, and here we just need to call status.http. okay. Now I'm going to save this file. I'm actually going to modify this query set to within a function. So I'm just going to paste that function here, then I explain to you guys. Now we create a function get object, set that self reference to quiz view, and we're just using try and except block and returning quiz object all if that exists. If that doesn't exist, or if it doesn't really return the quizzes, then it should raise HTTP not found. So instead of directly using query set object all, I'm just gonna use self dot get object, and let's save it. Now we're gonna set up the routing. So we're gonna go to URLs, and here one thing I would like to mention here, all the routing that we need to apply for QB1 application, we can do this way. So we can go to path, give a path here, and then use the include from Django URLs package, and then push in qb1.urls file. Now this URLs file doesn't exist, so we're gonna have to create one. I'm just gonna go and create a new urls.py file, and in this file we're gonna set the routing. So I'm gonna have to import this path. So I'm just gonna copy that here, and then once I have the path, I'll do URL patrons empty array. We use path, and then here I would like to use let's just say quizzes, add a slash here, and then we're gonna import that view as well. So from qb1.views, we're gonna import quiz view, and then we're gonna use that quiz view.as views. Let's define a name for that as well. So we do quizzes. Okay, there is a problem, cannot assign it to a function call. Yep, we're gonna have to add a comma here. Now that's all good, guys, and I would like to have a look at the view one more time, and yep, that's all good. Now we can test our application. I'm gonna click on this debugger and see if there's an error. There's no error. Now let's go to our browsable API, and here I would like to use QB1, and here we type quizzes. Let me verify that. Yep, that's quizzes, and I'm going to add a slash, enter, and there we go. We get a name, JavaScript test. This is the JavaScript test. Now I'm going to open, let me just add another quiz there. So I will open this table, and I'm going to click on add. That would be automatically generated. So we'll do a Python test. I said this is the Python test, and date we do 0. Do I have to select that? That would be 2019, and that would be today's date. Now today's month is October, and we use 05 as date. Okay, let's save this. I'm gonna refresh this, and now we're gonna get an error. It says signed integer is greater than maximum. All right, what's going on here? So there's a problem here. The time step that we're creating here, it's just, not really what we wanted. So I'll type 10-05, and I'm gonna save that, and it still converts that into timestamp. That's the problem there. So what we need to do, we need to use a Python shell. So I'm gonna go type Python. Let me actually go and select this row and delete this row and save that. That's gone. So do manage, and I'll do shell. And here I would like to import. So type from qb1.models import quiz, and then we use q as a variable. We type quiz, and that will take a name, and we can say Python test, and for the description we can say this is the Python test to test Python skill. Well, I don't care. Okay, that's done, and I'm going to q.save method, and now let's refresh this. We have a second Python test as well. I'm going to refresh this, and there you go, we get 2 objects getting back. Okay, so now so far we have learned how we can create models, and then we can create serializers. Let me open the serializer file. Okay, and also how do we use APIView class and return object. So we've seen the post as well, but let's just go and add the post method here. So I'm going to add def post method, and we're going to use a request object now. And here, once we get the object from the front end, we can grab that from requested data. So first let's create serializer equal to, and we are going to use quiz serializer here, and then we push in request.data there. Okay, once we do that, then we're going to use a try and catch block, and I want to check if that data is all good. So if the serializer is all good, so I'll say serializer.is a valid function, and after that, if it's valid, then we can use serializer.save. Okay, and then we can return a response object right here with serializer.data, and also we can say status equal to status, and here I want to say, for example, created 2 was 1. All right, if that's not the case, then what we need to do here is we need to throw an exception as, let's just say E, and we can print exception here, and then return the response. Let's just say serializer dot errors. So you can send errors or error message. So let's just send error message. I can send the status equal to status dot, and we can say 404 not found, or yeah, 404 not found is fine for now. Okay, let's save this, and I'm gonna refresh this page, and once I refresh, I get to see I can have a post request there as well. For the content, I'm gonna add an object saying name. We're gonna have to use a proper JSON, so name, and then for that we're gonna have to say C++ test. We can add a description there. And for description, this is the C++ test. Let's close the object and let's just send it. Now it says we must call isValid before accessing. The problem is here, we're gonna have to say data equal to requested data. Let me copy this so I don't have to type it again. Let's post and we get the response back, C++ test added. Now if I go to qb1/quizzes and refresh the page, as you can see, we can see name C++ test added. Let's verify that one more time. I'm just gonna change the name to, let's just say Angular test, and I want to say this is Angular test. Okay, let me just post that returns me this. I'm gonna refresh, and then we have a fourth object getting returned. We're getting name and description back from our quiz. Now if we take a look at the model, we have a created date, URL, name, and ID as well, which is auto-generated by Django Models. So why are we getting everything? The reason for that, if I take a look at serializers, here we're specifically saying in the fields, please send us back name and description only. If you want to grab all of the fields of the model, then you can use single quotes __all __. Let's save the file. Our server is running. I'm going to refresh this page, and now you can see we're getting ID, name, description, created date, and URL, and all of their values as well. This meta class provides some more attributes. For example, if you would like to just exclude URL and return everything, then you can do exclude equal to, we're going to pass in tuple, and here we just say URL, save the file, let's refresh the page. Now we're getting everything except URL. Let's finish off our delete and update method for this quiz view. So I'm going to create another function. So first of all, let's finish off with delete. So I'm going to name it delete. And we can have a request object. And now here, I would like to access the query. I can access all of the object by calling this method that we created. But instead of that, I'm going to grab one of the quiz, not all of them. So we don't want to delete all of them. So I'm going to grab one. So let's create a query set equal to, we access quiz.object, and here we can access by ID. So I'll say get and ID equal to, let's just say 4, because we can see we have a ID 4. Now here I would like to have a query set dot delete method. All right, and then after that we are going to return the response. And we can simply send a message saying delete. We can set the status code to, let me find something which says delete. Okay, we do a gone. Okay, let's save this file, and I'm gonna go to the Postman and I'm going to send a request. Okay, let's send it, and we get back delete. And here, if I refresh the page, we should not see this Python test which has an ID of 4. Let's refresh. There you go, it's gone. Let me add. So we'll go and change that request to post. And for this, we can say this is the Java test. I'm going to add another one. And you can see that ID is getting incremented automatically. So if we refresh, now we have 7 and 8 ID as well with the Java test and the Python test. Let's say we want to delete one specific quiz, and we can check that by ID. Now we should be able to send an ID from the front end, let's just say your React or Angular app or even Postman, and that would basically check what ID is coming in from the front end and we'll delete that. Let's change for to request.data, and then we can access ID. Okay, let's save this file, and I'm gonna take you to the Postman now. And here we have a body which has a name, a description, and ID. Okay, I'm gonna change the request to delete, and I'm gonna use this xww form URL encoded. And here I'm going to send ID 8. Let's send, and we're gonna get an error saying it does not exist. So the pretty error would be does not exist at query. So quiz matching query does not exist, which is fine because if we refresh the page, we don't see an ID 8. Okay, so what if I change that to 9 and I send it that request, and now we get a response as delete. So now I'm gonna refresh this page, and you can see ID 9 is gone. Let's write a function to update the quiz data. So all the way down, let me make some space here. And here we are going to define a function that would be put, and that would take a request as well. Okay, so here, first of all, we're gonna grab what quiz or which quiz we want to update. So I can name the variable quiz here, and then we can access quiz object.get id equal to request.data, and then we can access ID there. Now we got the quiz, and then we are going to serialize our request object. So let's just serialize equal to, we're going to use quiz serializer, and that will take our quiz, which is going to, update, and the data would be coming from request.data. And we need to set that equal to data actually. Yep, that's fine. Line, we are going to check if our serializer was valid. So use serializer is a valid function, and if that's valid, then we can save that. Okay, next we are going to actually return a response within this if. So let's just do a return response, and we can send back the data that was updated actually. So we can say data serializer.data. We can send the status code as well, and we can take a status from HTTP 202, which is expected. And then if there was a problem, then we can return a response object with the serializer.errors, and we can send the status to, let's just say dot. I'm actually going to use not found, which is wrong, but for now just leave it there. Okay, we got that, and now we're going to go to the Postman, and here I would like to update this one. So it says Python test. I would like to update this one. So here I would like to name this to as Java test, and we say this is a Java test, and ID would be 7. And here we can see ID is 7. Let me send this, and before we send this, we're going to change that method to put. Let's send it, and then we get back ID 7 Java test. This is Java test and a date. Now here it says Python, but if I refresh the page, we should see a Java test. Okay, so now I'm gonna change this to post, and then let's just leave the ID, and we can change this to Python test, and for the value we can say this is the Python test. I'm gonna send this, and we get back ID 9. So ID is getting incremented automatically. I'm gonna refresh the page, and there we go. We got ID 10 Python test. And if we want to update C++ to C, let's just try that. So I'm gonna change the ID to, let's just say 5, and we can say C test and C test. Let's change the method to put and send. Got the response back, and let's refresh this, and we get C test and a C test. Now so far what we have covered, let me take you to the documentation. We're going to click on views. So far we've covered function based views and class based views using APIView. Now you notice that we had to actually write a lot of code. We had to write this get method, post method, delete, and then put. Now, what if Django REST Framework provide all of these functionality automatically? Now, let's try writing a quiz view again, but with very less code. I'm going to take you to the documentation. Here we are at generics view page. Let me read this. So Django's generic views were developed as a shortcut for common usage patterns. They take certain common idioms and patterns found in a view development, and they abstract them so you can quickly write common views of data without having to repeat yourself. Now here an example for list create API view. So what this is going to do, it's going to provide two methods automatically. List is basically, it's going to list all the query set and return them. Create will basically give you a post method. Now this is an example, but we're going to go through this Minix, okay? But here we have some, concrete view classes. So the difference with all of these Minix is that some Minix will provide you to, get all the quizzes. Some will provide only the functionality of creating a new one. Some will provide update model Minix or destroy. So first of all, let's try this one. We're going to go into our code, and I'm going to comment all of this code. Now we're going to create a class quiz view, and I'm going to import generics right on the top. So here we're going to say from REST framework import generics. Okay, so here we'll use generics dot list create API view. Here first of all we're going to pass in the query set. So query set would be a quiz dot objects dot all. Okay, it's going to grab all the objects from quiz. Okay, let's use a serialize class attribute, and we're going to pass in what is a serializer for this. So we can say quiz serializer, and that's about it. Now if I refresh this page, what do you expect? I refresh this page, you can see that we were writing this get method, okay, and that we're returning our, all of the objects in the quiz. Similarly, if I just refresh, it's returning. We don't have to specify get method. Now, because we're using a list create API view, we can actually post that data as well. So here, if I say name, I would like to say, let me just type Swift test. Okay, and we'll say this is the Swift test. Let me post that, and now you can see it returns ID 11 Swift test. This is the Swift test. There you go. So if I refresh this page, let's continue. Actually get, and then here you can see we have a Swift test actually twice. Okay, because we don't have that name set to unique. Now you can see by just writing these two lines, we added the functionality of get and post automatically. You don't have to worry about, putting all of these code into your class base view. Now if I change this to list API view and save the file, and now I'm going to refresh this page. Now you notice if I refresh, it's only allowing me to do the get request. So here we can see we have HTTP request okay, and then we have a get request. There is no way to put that as post. Let's try it out with your postman. Let's click on post, and I'm going to actually uncheck this ID, and we can say Ruby test, and for this value I'm going to say this is the Ruby test. Let's send this, and it's going to tell us the method post not allowed. Now you can see sometimes you want to restrict a model read only. That means we can only able to read all the quizzes, but we are not actually able to, post. Let's explore documentation a bit more. So here we've used list API view, which is for read only endpoints. And also it provides the get method handler as well. So if you want to override the get method, you can do so. Also, it extends generic API view and list model Minix. List model Minix allow this to actually get all the objects from our quiz using the list method. If I click on this, you can see it provides the list method. Now similarly, if we go and create API view, let's go here and I'm gonna type generics dot list API view. So create, let me find the name again, 1 second guys. So create API view. So we're going to use create API view. I'm going to save this file and refresh. Okay, now you can see we are using list API view and create API view. So we are able to add more. So I'm gonna type, let's just say what language that we're missing here. So I'll say React test. It's a framework, not a language. And I'll say this is the React test. Okay, I'm gonna click on post and you can see we're able to post. Let's get, and then we have that React test there. Okay, now we're using generics list API view, create API view. I'm gonna go and say retrieve model minix. So here we have another one, retrieve API view, which allows you to use a get method, extends generic API view, and retrieve model minix. So retrieve model minix allow this retrieve method that implements returning an existing model instance in a response. Okay, so you can use this create list, create, retrieve, destroy, update. So all of these options are basically CRUD operations. So create, see, update, EU, R, read, which is like, list API view, and D is delete. Now you could write all of these here. For example, I'm gonna give a space here and we can use generics dot update API view. Let's save this file. I'm gonna refresh the browser and now you will see we have another okay, we haven't actually defined the method for that to update. Now to update something, you're gonna have to define which object that you're updating. Similarly, in our function here in the pull request, we're accessing this query set by accessing the ID from the front end. So this is how you will do that. Also, we have a destroy API view. So it's delete only endpoint for a single instance. So this includes or extend this destroy model minix. So I'm going to add that here as well. Generics dot destroy API view. Let's save this file and I'm going to refresh the browser. And now we should see a delete button there as well, which allows to delete something from our model. Okay, now here I would like to go to just quizzes. One thing I made a change here, I would like to actually remove that. These are the URL content that we'll talk about later. But for now, just refresh the page. And now you can see we have post. And here we're supposed to get that method done, but we don't really have that for now. So let's not worry about that. Here we have a delete method, so we can actually pass in the ID and then it will be deleted. Now similarly, here there are some combined concrete view classes. For example, you don't want to type list API view, retrieve, destroy, update separately. Here they have done something like list and create. So if you just want to get and then create, they can use this instead of defining these two separately, like list API view and also create API view. So you can use this list and create API view. So I'm just going to go back to the view and let's get rid of these. We'll definitely look at in demo, but I'm actually going to, let's get rid of this. I'm going to use generics dot list and create API view. Let's save the file. I'm going to refresh the browser and you can see we have both classes implemented, list API view and create API view, justifying list and create. Also here we have something like retrieve and update or retrieve and destroy. So we can use this as well. So I'm going to use retrieve and destroy. Let's save the file and let's see what we get. Refresh. Now here it says there's a problem with your assertion error.quizzes. So the argument named PK is expected and we use lookup field we don't have that lookup field as well. So here we're basically getting all the objects. We shouldn't be, doing that. So we're gonna have to define the lookup field set to pk. That would be a string, but we'll come back to this. We're gonna have to add some query sets there. We're gonna have to talk about this URL cons for that as well. But for now, just have a play with this retrieve or list, or other ones. Let me just change this back to list create APIView, and let's refresh this, and we're back there. Okay. Now we are going to show you something about ViewSets. So here we have talked about views in details, generic views as well. So you know that you can automatically apply CRUD operations. All of the CRUD operations can be applied as well, or you can have just a separate minix. But if you use minix, one thing to mention that you're gonna have to specify getter, post, or list, or create or retrieve method to actually make it work. But here, when you talk about concrete view classes, it will automatically add this post method handler by default, so you don't have to specify that. All right, so let's talk about some view sets here. I'm going to read this code. After routing has determined which controller to use for a request, your controller is responsible for making sense of request and producing appropriate output. Let me read this as well. Django REST framework allow you to combine the logic for a set of related views in a single class called ViewSet. In other framework, you might also find conceptuals such as, resources or controllers. A ViewSet class is simply a type of a class-based view. Remember this, that does not provide any method handler such as get or post. Instead, it provides actions such as list or create. The method handler for a view set are only bound to the corresponding action at the point of finalizing a view. So let's take a look at example for this. So I'm gonna go and actually comment this out as well. Let's create another class. We use quiz view class, and then we are going to import view set right on the top. So I'll type from REST framework, import ViewSet. Okay, now here we're going to use a ViewSet. Let's go back to the documentation, and here it's using ViewSet.ViewSet. Now here you will have to define a list and retrieve method. Also, we need to learn about how we can set the default router. So in API guide, here's a guide for the routers. We'll actually look at that with the ViewSets, because we need to define routers when using ViewSets. Now the important thing here that I would like to mention is this class model ViewSet. So if you are working with models, then this class will provide the functionality and make it very, very easy for you to actually use all the CRUD operations like create, delete, update. All of that stuff will be done automatically. Okay, first let's take a look at this model ViewSet class, and here's an guide for that. So let's just say model ViewSet class inherits from generic APIView, and it includes implementation for various actions by mixing in the behavior of various mixing classes. So model ViewSets allows list, create, update, partial update, and destroy. So let's go to our code, and I'm going to use this .model ViewSet. We're going to have to define the query set. So query set would be quiz.objects.all. Okay, and then the serialized class would be quiz serializer. Now to be able to use this, we're going to go to URL cons, and I would like to delete that from here, this line of code, because we're going to be using a router now from DRF, not from, we're not going to use this URL patterns. So first of all, let's import that. So we'll do REST framework.routers, and I'm going to use default router. Okay, so we are going to first of all create a variable router equal to default router. Okay, let's go back to documentation so I don't make any mistake for the router. So let's go up a bit where it says how you set up the router. Okay, that's all good. Now we're going to use router variable and we can call a register function. And for the register function, you're going to have to type, your prefix. So for that, we are going to pass in the route and then the VSET and then the base name. So we'll do or, and then in the single quotes, we say quizzes, comma, and then we're going to have to use quiz view, base name, we can name it quiz. Now, what we need to do is on the last line, we need to concatenate URL pattern. So we use plus equal to, and we concatenate routers.urls. Let's save the file, and here we have a view. Let's go and refresh this page, and it's not working. What I had to do is just restart our server by pressing on this button and say stop and rerun. If you're using VSCode, just stop the server and run it again. And then if I refresh the page, now you see we can, we can do a post here. Also, we can get. So we have a basic understanding of Django REST framework. We learned about views, model, serialization, and also we use ViewSets and general function-based views and class-based views. We briefly touched on a router, which lets you define routing using default router. So far we've covered a lot of things about Django REST framework. Now this is the first part of this series. Please have a look at the playlist link in the description of this video. So I'll see you guys in the next one.